Here's a fun paper I found recently. It's called Object Personification in Autism. This paper will be very sad if you don't read it. It's doing the very thing it describes, giving feelings to something that can't possibly have them. Through an online survey, they linked autism with anthropomorphism, which is when we give human traits to non-humans. But why? And what about for people without autism, since almost everyone seems to report doing this at some point? They propose a few explanations, but nothing definitive. Really? I don't know, I didn't read it. For almost as long as I can remember, I've had a lot of sympathy for objects. I'd feel sorry for a toy I don't play with anymore, food that was never eaten, an instrument I see being mishandled. But you felt it too, right? No? Okay, let me be more specific. Have you ever dropped an ice cube on the floor and felt bad for it? Not just that you did it, but for the cube itself? Just melting there on its own? No? Okay, let me be more specific. Imagine you're making a smoothie and you think, this will probably turn out not thick enough or not cold enough or whatever. So you take a handful of ice cubes from the freezer, but as you carelessly walk them to the blender, one slips from your hand onto the floor, so you're like, crap. And you toss it into the sink because you don't want to drink ground ice. Do you ever then feel bad for that ice cube? Like, oh no, now it has to melt away there, all alone, not serving its purpose of thickening the smoothie. It was made for nothing. It will do nothing except contribute to the ever-increasing entropy of the universe. No? Okay, you said it, not me.
Definitely use me. I'm super clean, super normal. God forbid a guy get a little saucy. Like, I think you should be with someone a little more experienced.
Everything is Alive is probably the most underrated piece of media I've ever encountered. It's changed my life, and yet no one ever talks about it. Imagine a podcast interview show. Not exactly difficult, I know. Except instead of interviewing celebrities or influencers or even random people on the street, in each episode, the host, Ian Chillog, interviews inanimate objects. Seriously. And I'm not even talking about objects that look like people or cute little stuffed animals. I'm talking about objects. Like in one of them, they interview a grain of sand, and then there's a follow-up episode where they interview that same grain of sand, but after it got turned into glass.
Well, let me tell you, the process involves a lot of heat.
And of course, the first one, and in my opinion, still the finest episode, is titled Louis, Can of Cola. And it's actually really good. Louis goes into these fascinating tirades about things like his feelings of insecurity. He's a generic cola, not a name brand like Coke or Pepsi.
People call it a knockoff. I've been called the best of the worst. You know, if you wanted to get my honest opinion, I believe in a blind taste test.
And how Louis handles rejection, having never been chosen to be consumed, stuck in the fridge for so long now.
On the one hand, I was very angry at human beings for being in this position to consume us. And then on the other hand, I was also very angry. How come you didn't want to consume me?
Now, it's obvious, I hope, that these aren't actually interviews with objects. They're voice actors that Ian has hired to pretend to be things. But this bizarre ritual they go through is so magnetic to me. It really speaks to this object sympathy issue I've had that I felt has never been treated before in a piece of media. That is, until I watched Recently, I saw Chungking Express. Classic Wong Kar-wai. It's grungy Hong Kong nights and handheld frames. What was most interesting to me in this movie wasn't the visual flair, the step printing that was done to create these dreamy sequences. It was scenes like this. Hold on, let's see what the soap has to say.
This is, This is, as we say, your sliver life crisis, right?
This is a film where a major plot point involves a character's relationship with canned pineapple as a stand-in for his ex-girlfriend. Another, also recently single, talks to a towel, telling it to stop crying as it drips onto the floor, then telling it it's helping it by hanging it up to dry. All this before giving a pep talk to his stuffed animal. The second half of this movie revolves around this guy's love interest, who repeatedly breaks into his home to mess with his things. Swap toothbrushes, relabeled cans, new goldfish, mysterious pills in his water. She completely changes the feel of his life without directly interacting with him. I think you're seeing the theme here. The characters in this movie are interacting with objects as replacements for people. The pineapple guy, Cop 223, picked out one can a day that all expire on May 1st, both his birthday and exactly a month after his breakup with a girl named May. In the second story, Cop 663 basically talks to his apartment, a bar of soap and then a dish towel, the stuffed animals. Maybe the objects are easier to comfort than himself after his breakup. Later, his new love interest confessed to his possessions before she did to him. And the best part is that after what seems like weeks of breaking into his home and messing with all of his stuff, the guy finds out and confronts her at work and she just goes, "What?" And they say the perfect woman doesn't exist. What? So why are they acting like this? In an article titled On Seeing Human, a three-factor theory of anthropomorphism, psychologists Epley, Waite, and Cacioppo lay out when and why people attribute human characteristics to non-humans. They write that we anthropomorphize as a process of inductive inference on non-human agents. In other words, we're assigning human traits because the only detailed model of a mind we have is of our own. So when we want to understand or connect with something that we don't really understand, we instinctively infer its behavior from the richest template available, the human one. It's a three-factor model, but let's focus on the third factor, which is we tend to anthropomorphize when we desire social connection or control over our environment. Sound familiar? Teleology, baby. A person feeling lonely may attempt to recover from this social pain by essentially creating social connection by making it up. This clever method of turning ambiguous non-human agents into avenues for social connection may help to alleviate social pain and a sense of disconnection when one is most in need. For instance, when one is going through a breakup. Most readers will resonate with this prediction from daily life, as stereotypes about the relationships between loneliness and anthropomorphism are widespread. From the elderly person who treats his or her cat as a bit too much like a spouse, to cinematic depictions such as Castaway, in which the shipwrecked protagonist, played by Tom Hanks, anthropomorphizes a volleyball named Wilson after being marooned on an island. That's a better example, isn't it? Those who are lacking human connection appear to seek it out in non-human connections. Notice, however, that this particular mechanism increases anthropomorphic descriptions that facilitate social connection specifically. One may be more likely to perceive a pet as thoughtful and considerate when one is feeling alone, but may be unlikely or even less likely to also perceive the pet as vindictive and deceitful, though those are also human characteristics. Perhaps this is because the social connection that we miss is typically feeling like we're being cared for or understood, not the bad stuff. If you're like me, then you've felt sympathy for many inanimate objects throughout your life. And if you're like me, then I have a question. Have you ever felt sympathy for your phone? It's the object we spend probably the most time with, and yet for me, I don't think about it much. I drop it, dirty it, sometimes I lose it, and I get distressed, but I rarely feel bad for the phone. This seems to fly in the face of our first idea, objects as connection. Surely if there was an object I've had time to connect with, it's my phone. But I haven't. A strange paradox. Well, not if you're technology philosopher Albert Borgmann.
Well.
Borgmann, who draws heavily from the ideas of Martin Heidegger, who, yes, I'm aware was a Nazi. Did you know that? Well, now you know. Sometimes you gotta separate the philosophy from the philosopher. Anyways, Borgmann argues that modern technological life is shaped by a controlling, homogenizing pattern he calls the device paradigm. Borgmann believes that technologies are not neutral tools. They come with a character that subtly houses values and relationships. To Borgmann, devices work by commodifying ends, concealing means, making resources more available, and cutting down on engagement. He uses an example of a hearth versus a central heating unit. The fireplace is fussy. It requires families to gather wood, set a fire, but beyond just providing heat, it also fosters human connection. The central heating unit hides all of its function. Most people wouldn't be able to describe how it works. In effect, it just commodifies the ends. It heats your home, and that's it. To him, a human life can't be completely device-dominated. Engagement, commitment, and meaning must be reinserted. I think this helps explain why I don't emotionally bond with my phone. I'm just barely old enough to remember a bit of life before the smartphone. It's hard to appreciate the extent of this today, but it's commodified everything. I'm sure you've heard endlessly before about how much your phone sucks, but I do hope this is a new angle. The phone delivers all of the ends with none of the means. And because there's no effort, there's no story. Nothing to attach to, nothing to love. Recently, an artist named Jackie sent me a handmade art piece by mail after seeing the museum label video. Their pieces revolve around a theme. The first was on revisiting, and they included this art piece and a collage bookmark. I use this bookmark quite a bit now. The physicality of reading left room for experimentation and lets it carry meaning in a way that pixels just don't. Borgmann warns that a life full of convenience devices pushes our tools into the background, where we no longer notice their effects on us or our environment. In his example of the fireplace, social interaction once centered around the act of maintaining a shared flame. Replace it with central heating, and the warmth remains, but the ritual disappears. The family grows comfortable yet detached from one another, and from the hidden costs of the electricity that now does the carrying. This seems incredibly prescient. When was this book written? The guy from Lessons from the Screenplay has another channel. He did a video on the companion cube from Portal. If you've never played the game, the companion cube basically functions the same as all these other weighted cubes in the game that hold down buttons for you, except it also has a little heart on it. So you take this cute little cube with the heart on it through various puzzles and challenges, and it serves as your companion in a game with no other human characters.
The symptoms most commonly produced by enrichment center testing are superstition, perceiving inanimate objects as alive, and hallucinations.
At the end of your adventures, famously, you're forced to incinerate it.
However, it cannot accompany you for the rest of the test and, unfortunately, must be euthanized. You euthanized your faithful companion cube more quickly than any test subject on record. Congratulations.
So this video tries to explain why we feel so much for this cube, using a concept in economics called the endowment effect, where we tend to value things that we own more than the generic version of that thing. It's an excellent video, but on its own, the endowment effect isn't a satisfying answer for me. We do tend to value our own things more, but focusing on economic valuation, ownership, loss aversion, I think doesn't get at the emotional core of our attachment. It better explains pricing, not feeling, and it directs attention away from what's actually happening inside the game. If we apply what we've learned so far, part of it might be missing connection. You're isolated for so long in this game, but all you have is this cube. You might start to crave connection with an object. We might also try to apply the device paradigm. In Borgmann's terms, it's a thing, not a device. The physicality and nature of things like the cube gives them friction and character. You have to carry it, protect it, drag it through each puzzle. It demands engagement. If the puzzles were solved by switches on walls or motion sensors, we wouldn't care.
Congratulations.
If you do care for your phone and, say, you feel bad for it when you drop it, then perhaps at some point in your life it made the transition from device back to thing, either by giving you some real trouble in the past, not always functioning the way you expect, or perhaps you understand technology more than most. If you're someone who could explain how a phone works down to its basic functional units, then the means wouldn't be as hidden to you, and the ends wouldn't feel as commodified. Or maybe none of those things. Maybe you're just naturally an incredibly empathetic person, which brings us to... Many years ago, a friend of mine gave me a novelty drinking glass on my birthday. It was so long ago I forgot which birthday, but I remember which friend. It had a portrait of my favorite physicist on it, Richard Feynman, who I'm told has had some negative press recently, but sometimes you gotta separate the physics from the physicist. Anyways, I brought this cup with me for years and years through plenty of moves until one day I noticed it got chipped. A little piece on the top came off and it became dangerous to drink from. In fact, someone told me exactly that. Why are you keeping this glass? It's broken, you should throw it out. And honestly, they were right. It was dangerous to keep in the apartment for guests, and it had already served its purpose for years, so I decided to toss it out and stop! Toss it? Are you crazy? I did end up throwing it out, which is why I can't show it to you now. I spent a long time searching for a replacement online, but it doesn't seem like they sell it anymore. To someone else, it looked like any other drinking glass, but I felt terrible, not just for the memories attached to the object, but for the glass itself. I thought it would be sad to be thrown out. Is that insane? A friend of mine recently told me about a website called Significant Objects. It catalogs a fascinating experiment that was run about object valuation and narrative, which the site describes like this. First, the experiment's curators purchase objects for a few dollars from thrift stores and garage sales. Then a writer is paired with each object. They then write a fictional story about it, and voila, an unremarkable thing has suddenly become a significant object. Then they list these for sale on eBay, and instead of a factual description, the fictional story is used. Then the bidder receives the object, along with a printout of that story, and the results are published to the website. But I think you know what the results were. The moment a story existed, the valuation skyrocketed, even though the buyers knew the story was fake. The narrative attached to the object, and even the meta-narrative that a unique experiment was being run on these objects, dramatically increased the perceived value of these objects. This isn't really a thing you can do anymore, because a detailed story isn't proof of effort anymore, because we've actually commodified storytelling, because we created... Still, back in 2010, narrative, it turns out, was an incredibly valuable thing you could attach to an object.
Do you ever think about, what if you could tell a story?
Yeah, I mean, I actually have a book that, I haven't written it because I'm a towel.
Right. Well, I'd love to hear about it.
About my book? Okay, well, it's called The Towel.
Okay. Right, what you know.
And so there's a...
This is what happens when an object stops being just a device, a means to an end. It becomes a little piece of you. My Feynman cup was a tool to drink from, but also a witness to years of breakfasts, dishwashes, moves, and of course, to a moment where someone cared enough about me and my interests to get me that cup for my birthday. Throwing it away was erasing proof that those things happened. Psychologists Heather Gray, Kurt Gray, and Daniel Wegner ran a study asking people to judge which things in the world they thought had minds. People, animals, robots, even dead bodies. What they found was that we don't see mind as a single quality that something either has or doesn't. Instead, we see it on two scales. Agency, the ability to act, plan, and make choices, and experience, the ability to feel, to suffer, to sense, and to witness. God, for instance, was seen as high in agency, but low in experience. We ascribe power and intention, but not pain or physical sensation. Now, here's the strange part. They found that we empathize most with things that we see as high in experience, but low in agency. Babies, for instance, experience many things but can't easily exert their control on the world. Pets are another example. And for some of us, just maybe, a chipped drinking glass. I mean, it makes sense that these are the category of things we want to protect. They can't protect themselves. The same study suggests that this is a psychological foundation for moral judgment. When we feel bad for what we imagine can feel pain. If you have agency, then you're responsible. If you have experience, then you're susceptible. Even if logically we know it's silly, when we imagine an object as feeling, we'll instinctively treat it as something to be protected. The type of person to root for the underdog, to feel intensely for scorned fictional characters, might be familiar with the feeling. When you sense low agency, your instinct might be to conjure up high experience.
On the one hand, I was very angry at human beings for being in this position to consume us. And then on the other hand, I was also very angry. How come you didn't want to consume me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you think about being consumed by a human, do you think about the human that you want to be in?
If and when I'm finally consumed, I hope I'm consumed by someone who enjoys it.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the three-factor model from that first study? The third was connection, so what were the first two? I'm so glad you asked. The first, believe it or not, was called elicited agent knowledge. Basically, this is what I summarized when I said the clearest template we have for explaining things is the human mind. And the more something evokes human characteristics, the more we lean on this framework. But that's not necessarily just because it looks human, like I was doing with the googly eyes. Epley and colleagues focus on visual or behavioral cues, but it seems like the concept also applies to emotional ones. Objects absorb and reflect our experiences back to us. When they contain these emotions, parts of ourselves, like with the glass, then it starts to make sense why I can feel for it almost like I would a person. The second factor is affectance motivation. When the world feels unpredictable, giving a thing intentions makes it feel more understandable or manageable. Experiments showed that when people were made to feel uncertain or wanted to understand a system better, they were more likely to anthropomorphize it. A famous example is a study where participants interacted with a randomly moving shape on a screen, like a bouncing triangle. When the movements were erratic or hard to predict, people were far more likely to describe it in human terms. It's getting frustrated, it's confused, it's crazy. But when the same shapes moved in a simple, predictable pattern, participants described them more mechanically. It's programmed to go in circles. I think this is a good time to mention that I did actually read the paper about object personification in autism. It posits 3 explanations, one of which is that it's used to reduce uncertainty and thus alleviate anxiety in autism. They say that ascribing human-like qualities to non-human agents has been shown to make them more predictable and understandable, and they cite a 2010 paper by, you guessed it, Epley, Waits, and Cacioppo, among others. Another explanation they gave is about reducing social disconnection in autism, and yeah, there they are again. The last explanation was about synesthesia, which is apparently more prevalent in autistic individuals than the general population, but we don't want to get into that right now. Epley and his co-authors noted that taking advantage of their 3 factors to intentionally elicit anthropomorphizing tendencies could be both useful and dangerous. Increasing anthropomorphism can make us feel more connected and direct our attention to useful places, but it can also make us see minds where there aren't any, which can have us connecting more with things than with people. I used to be a lot more worried about that second part. When I grew up and started noticing myself feeling sorry for objects, I told myself it's irrational to care, that sympathy should be reserved for people. I actually tried to force myself to care less about inanimate objects, but I think caring for objects is part of living among them. They watch us grow up, fall apart, start again. Never reacting, but they were there. High in experience, if you let them be. And so when they're gone, they can leave behind the space where we imagine attention used to be. A little reminder that love, in any form, is mostly about noticing. So I threw the glass out. But recently I was looking through my childhood bedroom, and in my old bookshelf, I found the box it originally came in, that I'd actually kept there all these years. So I'll be taking that with me. How wonderful it is that something that can't feel sympathy can teach you so much about it. It was thick enough without the ice.